Welcome back to the Music in Our Homeschool podcast. I'm Gina Mayo, your guide to making fine art simple, joyful, and totally doable. Today's episode is called The Ultimate Starter List, 10 Classical Pieces for Homeschoolers in 15 Minutes. I won't be playing the music clips here. Instead, I'll give you short composer snapshots, tell you what each piece sounds like, why it matters, and what to listen for. Then all you need to do is head over to the companion blog post, which is linked in the show notes or description, and you'll find videos of the music to listen to and a printable listening log. Think of this as your friendly talk it through tour, and then the blog post is the press play part. If you are a homeschooler looking for ways to easily and affordably include a quality music education in your homeschool, you've come to the right place. This is the Music in Our Homeschool podcast. I'm Gina Mayo, homeschooling mom of 8 and music teacher for over 30 years. My goal today is to give you just enough story context and listening tips so that when you do go to listen, it's like meeting an old friend for the first time. You know who they are, what they're about, and the little quirks that make them special. Here's how I recommend using this. First, listen to this episode to get the background for what to listen for. And then sometime, either this week or in the next, go back to the blog post and play one piece per day for 2 weeks. Each time, jot down a few things that you noticed on the printable guide that's included. All right, let's start our listening journey tour in the Baroque era. The Baroque era for music was about 1600 to 1750. You could think of this as a time of energy, echo, and elegant patterns. The Baroque period is like stepping into a grand palace in Europe. Intricate ceilings, patterned floors, carved gold details everywhere you look. In music, this meant layers of sound, repeating patterns and constant forward motion, and a bit of complexity. The first piece you'll listen to is Johann Sebastian Bach, J.S. Bach's Brandenburg Concerto No. 5 in D major. Johann Sebastian Bach is often called the architect of music, and I love that description because his works really are like buildings you can explore with your ears. He was born in 1685 in Germany, and Bach came from a long line of musicians. He spent his life as a church organist, teacher, and composer, raising a very large family. He had 20 children with 2 wives, and writing music for whatever job or occasion needed it. The Brandenburg concertos were kind of a job application. Bach sent 6 of them to a nobleman named Margrave of Brandenburg in hopes of landing a position there. Imagine handing in 6 musical resumes that say, "Here's everything I can do." The 5th concerto is special because it gives the harpsichord, which was one of the main keyboard instruments of that era because the piano had not been invented yet. And it was usually a background instrument, but he gave it a starring role. When you listen, notice how the flute, violin, and harpsichord seem to be having a lively conversation back and forth. The ritornello theme, a short musical idea, keeps coming back around like a chorus between their exchanges. And then there's the harpsichord solo near the end. It starts politely, then suddenly bursts into a whirlwind of notes, as if the harpsichord decided, "Step aside, I've got this." The second piece to listen to is Johann Pachelbel's Canon in D. He was also from Germany and lived a generation before Bach. He wrote many pieces, but this one, the Canon in D, has outlived all the rest. I'm positive you have heard this piece before, probably at a wedding, in a movie, or even a TV commercial. It's built on something called a ground bass. It's a short bass line that repeats over and over and over. In fact, there's lots of jokes from the cello section, which gets a little bored playing the same 4 notes over and over and over. The upper parts do change, but the base stays the same. Imagine a layer cake where the base is always the same, but each new layer has slightly different frosting and decorations. As you listen, see if you can hear that bass line repeating over and over underneath everything. Then notice how each violin enters one by one with the same melody, starting at different times. The result is calm, graceful, and a beautiful example of how repetition plus small changes can create something deeply satisfying. The third piece is also from the Baroque era, and this is by Antonio Vivaldi, and he wrote a beautiful set of pieces called the Four Seasons, and we will be listening to one of the pieces from Spring. Antonio Vivaldi was an Italian violinist and a Catholic priest. He was known as the Red Priest because he had bright red hair. He spent much of his career teaching, though, at a girls' orphanage in Venice, Italy. He wrote hundreds of concertos for his students there to play. Spring is from a set of 4 violin concertos, each depicting a season of the year. Vivaldi even wrote little poems that go along with them. So when you listen to Spring, you will hear birds chirping, flowing streams, and a sudden thunderstorm. And you're hearing exactly what he intended. Listen for the trills in the violin that sound like birdsong, and the gentle ripples that suggest a bubbling brook, and the dramatic, fast notes when the storm arrives. It's musical storytelling at its finest, Baroque style. For our fourth piece, we'll move to the classical era, which was from about 1750, that was the year that Johann Sebastian Bach died, until 1820. And what signifies this era is balance, clarity, and singable tunes. After the ornate detail of the Baroque, the classical era feels like opening the windows and letting in some clean, fresh air. The melodies are clearer, the phrases are balanced, and the forms are much more easy to follow. First, listen to Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart's Eine kleine Nacht music, Movement 1, Allegro. Mozart was an Austrian prodigy who started performing at age 5, and he composed over 600 works before dying early at just the age of 35. His gift for melody was unmatched. He could write tunes that felt inevitable, as if they had always existed. Eine kleine Nacht music means a little night music. It's a serenade, and it was written in 1787, probably for a social gathering. The first movement is energetic, but perfectly balanced, like a beautifully set table. As you listen, notice how the phrases feel like musical sentences, some asking a question, others giving an answer. The main melody is supported by clean harmonies, and everything feels just right. Nothing too long, nothing too short. And with number 5, we move on to Ludwig van Beethoven. He bridged the classical and the Romantic era, which came next after the classical era. He began losing his hearing in his late 20s, yet he continued to compose some of the most powerful, beautiful, majestic music ever written. His Symphony No. 5 begins with the famous short, 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 long motif. Bum, ba, ba, bum. That tiny idea shows up everywhere in the piece, in the melody, in the accompaniment, in transformed versions, driving the whole movement. Listen for the drama of sudden louds and softs, the relentless repetition of that 4-note motif, and the way Beethoven builds tension until it feels like the music might burst. It's the sound of a struggle moving toward triumph. So as I just said, Beethoven was partway in the classical era and partway in the Romantic era. The Romantic era was about 1820 to 1900. And what signifies this era is color, emotion, and expanding orchestras. The Romantic era expanded everything. The orchestras were bigger, the pieces were longer, and there was a focus on personal emotion and strong emotion and storytelling. So we'll listen to another Beethoven piece for number 6, and this is his Moonlight Sonata, Movement 1, Adagio sostenuto. Here Beethoven turns inward. The name Moonlight wasn't his, it came later, but it fits the mood perfectly. This piece is for solo piano, with a steady rippling pattern underneath a singing melody in a minor key. Listen for the gentle, unchanging triplet rhythm. So triplet in threes, the long sighing phrases, and the quiet intensity that never quite erupts. It's intimate, personal, and timeless, and one of my favorite pieces of music. Next, we have Tchaikovsky's Waltz of the Flowers from The Nutcracker. Peter Tchaikovsky was a Russian composer with a gift for melody and orchestration. This waltz from the Nutcracker Ballet is graceful and expansive. Notice the delicate harp notes at the beginning, the way the melody passes from one section of the orchestra to another, and the graceful sway of 3 beats per measure. By the end, the music swells into a lush, full sound. It's pure romantic beauty. And then number 8, we get Antonin Dvořák's Symphony No. 9, second movement, Largo. This symphony is also called From the New World. Antonin Dvořák, from what is now the Czech Republic, spent several years in the United States in the 1890s. This symphony blends European craftsmanship with American folk influence. The Largo, slow movement, opens with a warm, soulful English horn solo. It's unusual and unforgettable. Listen for the conversation between the soloist and the orchestra, and the way the theme feels both homesick but hopeful. Now we're moving into the late 1800s and early 1900s. From about 1890 to the 1930s is the Impressionist movement for music. Here, music becomes about color, atmosphere, and eventually the blending of classical traditions with jazz and popular styles in America. So we have, for number 9, Claude Debussy, a French composer. He was a pioneer of musical impressionism, which was more concerned with creating an atmosphere in the music than following strict forms. Let's listen to Clair de Lune, which means moonlight. Listen for the gentle flexibility and tempo, the shimmering harmonies, and the way the phrases seem to float. It's more like a painting in sound than a traditional piece. And a fun activity would be to compare Debussy's Clair de Lune with Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. And then number 10 is George Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue. The first American composer that's on this list. He blended classical concert music with jazz and blues. Rhapsody in Blue opens with the famous clarinet glissando, like a musical slide into the piece. As you listen, notice the jazz rhythms, the playful back and forth between the piano and the orchestra, and the way that Gershwin shifts from cinematic climaxes to laid-back, bluesy sections. It's the sound of early 20th century America. Well, now you have the story and the listening tips. Your next step is to head to the companion blog post in the show notes and listen to the music. You have 2 options. You could play 1 piece a day for the next 2 weeks and jot down an observation from each piece. That will take less than 15 minutes a day. Or you can play just a part of each piece on one day, just a minute, and get through all 10 pieces in one listening session. If you'd like even more done-for-you lessons, playlists, and printables that slide right into your homeschool with no prep work needed from you, then I invite you to join us in Music in Our Homeschool Plus. It's built so you can press play and go, even on your busiest days. Well, I'm Gina Mayo, and this has been the Music in Our Homeschool podcast. I invite you to please share this episode with a homeschooling friend of yours, and thank you for listening. Happy music making at home this week.